There is a rule in old money that nobody writes down. And it is not the rule most people expect. It is 9 words long. I say them to every client before a single document is signed. Before a single dollar moves from one account to another. I have said them approximately 400 times. 14 people have asked me to repeat them. 2 have written them down on the back of a business card. 1 had them engraved, discreetly, on the inside of a watch case. Marcus Delacroix did none of these things. He laughed. It was a Wednesday in September. He had just sold his father's machine parts company for $11,460,000. And he was still holding, in his left hand, the pen he had used to sign the closing documents an hour earlier. The pen told me something before he opened his mouth. It was a cheap pen. A giveaway pen. The kind a bank teller hands you at a counter. And a man who had just become worth $11 million was still holding onto it the way you hold onto something you are not sure you are allowed to put down. I said the 9 words. He laughed, not cruelly. Not dismissively. But the particular way a man laughs when someone tells him the sky might fall on a day this clear. He did not know yet that I was already right. I will tell you what the 9 words are before this story ends. Not yet. First, you should understand why I say them at all. Because the reason is not sentimental. And it is not a line I read from a compliance manual at some brokerage. In 16 years, I have watched money change hands more than 400 times. Inheritance. Business sale. Settlement. One unusually large insurance payout I will describe in a different story. In every one of those 400 transfers, there is a window, measured not in months but in minutes, when a person stops thinking of the money as something to protect and starts thinking of it as something already spent. The 9 words exist to close that window before it opens. Marcus was 51. Machine parts. A shop his father had built with 2 employees in 1974 and left to him. Along with a mortgage-free house in Ohio and a wedding ring that no longer fit his fingers. In a will that ran to 4 pages. I want to be precise about something. Marcus was not reckless. Most people who lose a fortune are not reckless in the way the word implies. They are ordinary. They are careful about small things and careless. Exactly once. About the one thing that mattered. I did not know yet which thing that would be. 6 months later. I did. Here is what Marcus owned in the 6 months after the sale. Before anything went wrong. A 4-bedroom house. Already paid off. A 2019 pickup truck with 61,000 miles on it. $217,600 sitting in a checking account. Untouched. Because Marcus, like most first-time sellers, did not know what to do with sudden liquidity beyond staring at it. And, in an account with my firm, $11,460,000. The entire proceeds of a business that no longer had his name on the door. By every measure available to me on that Wednesday, Marcus was a careful man. He drove the same truck for 3 more years. He kept the checking account boring. He did not buy a boat. In the language of our business, he presented as low risk. Every indicator on his intake file pointed toward a client who would be fine. Every indicator except one, and it does not appear on any intake file. It was the laugh. The first decision came in month 3. A man named Gerald, who had worked the floor of Marcus's father's shop for 19 years, came to him with a proposal. Gerald wanted to open his own specialty tooling operation. Marcus knew the machines. Marcus knew the margins. Marcus knew, better than anyone alive, that Gerald could run a shop floor. Gerald needed $339,600. He called it a bridge. He said 90 days. I was not in the room for that conversation. I only heard about it in the room after. When Marcus called to ask how quickly the money could move, I asked him one question. I asked whether he remembered the 9 words. He said, "Of course, but this is Gerald." That sentence, "But this is Gerald," is a sentence I have heard, with a different name inserted where Gerald's name sits. No fewer than 112 times in 16 years. It is never wrong about the person. Gerald really was reliable. Gerald really did know machines. It is wrong about the money. Every time. Without exception. 90 days became 14 months. The bridge never quite broke even. And by the time Marcus stopped extending it credit, the $339,600 had become $591,300. Spread across 4 separate transfers. Each smaller than the last. Each justified by a story that was, individually, completely reasonable. The balance was $10.868.700. Gerald was the easy one to forgive. He was, after all, a name Marcus had known since childhood. The second decision did not have that excuse. If you have watched any of my other stories, you already know the family loan is the single most consistent way I have watched a fortune leave someone's hands. But there was a second decision in Marcus's file. And it is the one that surprised me. Because it had nothing to do with generosity at all. It had to do with a boat show. Marcus did not buy a boat. I told you that already. And it remains true. But in April of the following year, he attended a boat show with a college friend named Patrick. And Patrick introduced him to a marina developer raising capital for a private members dock expansion in the Florida Keys. $596,800. Structured as a limited partnership. Projected at 22% annually. Marcus called me from the parking lot. I could hear seagulls behind his voice. I asked the same question I always ask. Did he remember the 9 words? He said he did. He said this was different. He said the projections were audited. I wrote none of this down when he called from that parking lot. I did not need to. Some conversations you remember without paper. The shift, and I want to be exact about when it happened. Because it did not happen when he wrote the check, happened 4 seconds earlier. In that parking lot, when he used the word audited as though it meant the same thing as the word guaranteed. By the time the check cleared, the outcome was no longer a decision he was making. It was a formality he was completing. By September, a hurricane had damaged the site. By October, an inspection had failed. By December, the partnership filed for bankruptcy and returned Marcus 14 cents on every dollar he had put in. $596,800 had become $83,600. The balance was $10.355.500. Marcus told me, more than once, that the marina was the mistake that taught him the most. He was wrong about that. The lesson that actually changed him arrived 14 months later. And it did not come with an invoice. Here is where most stories like this one end. I have told several of them already. And if you have watched them, you know the ending. The client keeps making the next reasonable sounding decision until the number reaches 0. And the 0 arrives quietly. On an ordinary Tuesday. With no drama attached to it at all. Marcus's story does not end there. The reason it does not end there is the only reason I am telling it to you. 14 months after the marina filing, Marcus's daughter called him. She was 26. She needed $189,400. Urgently. For what she described as a medical situation involving her fiancé's family, a business, a hospital bill. A story with just enough specificity to feel true and just enough vagueness to make verification feel unkind. She asked her father not to tell me. She asked him not to tell her mother. She asked him to wire it that night. Marcus called me instead. It was 11:40 in the evening. It was the first time in 3 years he had called me before doing anything at all. I asked him why he called this time. After Gerald. After the marina. After roughly $1,104,500 had already left his accounts through decisions that had each felt, at the moment he made them, entirely sound. He said something I have not forgotten. He said, because this is the first time it scared me instead of exciting me. Fear instead of excitement is closer to the real function of the 9 words than anything I have told you so far. They were never designed to stop a person from being generous, or from taking a risk, or from trusting a friend. They were designed to produce exactly the feeling Marcus described. For the first time, at 11:40 on a Tuesday night, a small, specific discomfort. A pause before the wire. Not a prohibition of it. Marcus did not send the money that night. In the morning, I gave him 3 questions to ask his daughter. Questions that had nothing to do with distrust and everything to do with verification. By Wednesday, the story had changed twice. By Friday, his daughter admitted there was no fiancé's family, no hospital bill. There was a boyfriend, 6 months into the relationship, who had asked her for the money first. And she had not known how to say no to him any more than her father had known how to say no to Gerald. Or to Patrick. Or to a marina in the Florida Keys. By Friday, the truth was no longer in question. Only the timeline of the next attempt. What happened next explains something most advisors get wrong about their own advice. And it has almost nothing to do with money. I have seen this exact sequence. Reasonable decision. Reasonable decision. Reasonable decision. Catastrophe disguised as an emergency. 112 times in 16 years. 6 of them ended the way Marcus's nearly did. In a phone call at an unusual hour. Followed by a pause that saved everything. The other 106 ended in a wire transfer. There is a statistic repeated at nearly every wealth management conference I have ever attended. Usually without much thought given to why it is true. Roughly 70% of wealthy families lose their fortune by the end of the second generation. Roughly 90% lose it by the end of the third. Everyone in the industry quotes this number. Almost no one explains it correctly. The explanation is not stupidity. And it is not bad luck. And it is not, as some commentators like to suggest, a moral failing particular to people who did not build their own money. In 16 years, I have never once seen a fortune of real size destroyed by a single bad decision made in a single afternoon. What I have seen, 400 times, is a fortune destroyed by a sequence of decisions that were each individually defensible, a loan to someone reliable, an investment with audited projections, a wire transfer to a frightened daughter. And it is precisely because each decision is defensible that no single one ever triggers the alarm that would have stopped the sequence. I told you, at the very start of this story, that there is a rule in old money nobody writes down. Here is the part one did not explain yet. It has nothing to do with tax shelters or trust structures. It has to do with restraint practiced on the boring days, not the dramatic ones. This is why the 9 words are not a warning. A warning implies danger. And none of Marcus's individual decisions look dangerous. The 9 words are a discipline, meant to be said before every transfer of capital. The boring ones and the exciting ones alike. Precisely because the boring ones are where the danger actually lives. 4 observations. From 16 more years of watching this pattern repeat with different names attached to it. First, the size of the request has almost no relationship to the size of the eventual loss. $339,600 to Gerald cost more, in the end, than $596,800 to the marina. Because Gerald's story kept evolving in small increments that never individually justified saying no. Second, the phrase "but this is," followed by any name, is the single most reliable predictor of a bad transfer I have found in 16 years of watching. Not the amount, not the paperwork, that one sentence. Third, audited is not guaranteed. And the 2 words get confused most often by people who are otherwise careful. Precisely because carefulness in one part of a life creates a false sense of carefulness in every part. Fourth, and I did not fully understand this until Marcus's daughter called him at an unusual hour, the discipline arrives. When it arrives at all. As a feeling rather than a formula. Marcus did not recite the 9 words that night like a script. He felt the specific, trained discomfort they exist to produce. And he called me instead of the bank. There is still one thing about that night I have not told you. Marcus still owns the pickup truck. It has 94,000 miles on it now. He still owns the house in Ohio. As of the most recent statement I reviewed, his portfolio stands at $10,942,800, smaller than the day he signed the closing documents. And larger, by a considerable margin, than it would have been if his daughter's phone call had gone the way 3 earlier decisions had gone. I still remember the pen in his hand that first Wednesday, and the laugh. And the particular way a person laughs when he believes the sky is too clear to fall. I never did tell you the 9 words. You have been waiting for them since the first sentence of this story. And I suspect, by now, you have already guessed most of them from the shape of everything that followed. Here they are, exactly as I have said them approximately 400 times. In the same order, without variation. You do not own this money. You guard it. 9 words, not a contract, not a clause an attorney can enforce. A sentence I say once, before the first document is signed, and rarely again, unless a client calls me at an unusual hour, holding a phone he has forgotten to put down. Marcus heard those 9 words on a Wednesday in September and laughed. He did not hear them again from me for 3 years. He heard them, I believe, from himself, at 11:40 on a Tuesday night, in his own voice, before he called mine. That is the only success I can claim in this story. And it is not a small one. I did not save Marcus's money. Marcus did. I only gave him 9 words. And enough patience to wait for the night he would need them. I'll tell you another one next time.